Thank you very much, Conference. So we move now to resolution number 13, a Scottish Statistics Agency. And the resolution is to be proposed by Ronnie Cowan, MP, and seconded by Stuart McMillan, MSP.
Afternoon, Conference. I'm delighted to move this resolution for a Scottish Statistics Agency. The establishment of an SSA is another logical step in the establishment of an independent country. When we are independent, and indeed as we move towards that day, we need accurate, timely, non-partisan data. Official statistics that can guide evidence-based policy. Official statistics that can help commercial and charitable organisations. Official statistics that are a common good. They can enable Scotland's people to understand not just their nation's economy, but their lives by showing the nature of policies and their impact. As an SSA, we would charge them with producing data that's not just relevant nationally, but also pertinent to the wide range of urban and rural communities that Scotland contains. The UK relies heavily on the ONS, the Office of National Statistics. They rely on them for a large part of the government statistics, regulated by the UK Standards Authority. Often statistics are gathered by means of representative samples. For a randomly sampled poll of 1,000 people, this should mean that 95% of surveys should give a result very close to the answer that the whole population would give if asked. Teasing out or disaggregating a Scottish view from a UK samples can be difficult. In a UK sample of 1,000 people, we would expect only 83 Scottish people to have been surveyed. A UK sample of 10,000 people would mean 830 Scottish people. Broken down to local authority level, the sample size can be so small as to make drawing firm conclusions difficult. For instance, the ONS, Official Labour Market Statistics for NOMS, provides the annual number of workless households at local authority level, but the sample size is too small to reliably identify the number of children living in those households. Inverclyde, my constituency, has 5,600 workless households, but no data is available on the number of children living in them. So while the numbers at Scotland level may be sufficient to indicate that the Scottish Government focus on tackling child poverty is clearly justified, the local numbers needed to plan interventions and monitor impact need to be found from elsewhere. The UK level data may also not reflect the different priorities and interests in Scotland. Agility is about how quickly data collection shifts in response to changing needs. We know that work does not provide a guaranteed way out of poverty. 2/3 of children growing up in poverty live in a family where one parent works. This suggests new metrics are needed to capture the prevalence of poverty and identify who is poor. The efforts of the Scottish Government to tackle poverty in Scotland caused by the Tory welfare reforms, example mitigating the bedroom tax, is a stark example of how there are likely to be significant differences in the priorities between the Scottish and UK governments in terms of what data we're interested in gathering. Ensuring statistical integrity, making personal data secure, developing a culture within which civil service statisticians work free of inappropriate influence are important issues for all governments in building public confidence in its official statistics. Greater independence and statistical capacity is also connected to another issue, harnessing and the integrity of data of other non-governmental collectors such as enterprise organisations, universities, think tanks and third sector organisations, not only in relation to the economy but in other major policy areas. To avoid duplication or confusion, a framework would be needed which could be agreed on how such collaboration would work. This would be for those involved in the feasibility study to consider, and we hope for as wide as possible a range of input to that. There is no shortage of ideas and choices. The SSA may take the form of a single centralised agency in which it is charged with collecting or commissioning data, the vast majority of statistical data. Alternatively, it may be more of an overseer of a decentralised network of specialised data providers, a regulator to ensure the data meets a sufficiently stringent code of practice, as well as maintaining a data portal to ensure access to the gathered data. So maybe, to sum up, the development of an SSA is another area in which citizens' assemblies could be extremely worthwhile.
Thank you, Ronnie. To second the resolution, Stuart McMillan, MSP, to be followed by Christopher Duffy, to move the remit back.
Good afternoon, Conference. You're a hardy bunch, a statistics debate on a Sunday lunchtime. Thanks for staying back for it. Generally, Conference, I do want you to back this resolution by acclaim today. And one of the comments from Julie Hepburn earlier on, I thought it kind of put the nub on the issue that Scotland actually faces and this issue of independence and moving our nation forward. Julie said earlier on that the Westminster is a cesspit of Westminster governance. Now, how often have we been told in Scotland that Scotland is too wee, too stupid and too poor to actually become an independent country? This is where this type of agency will be so important to actually get that message over to the wider population that actually Scotland isn't too wee, too stupid and too poor to become that independent country that we actually want it to become. Now, we know that the Westminster system is broken, and this Westminster political system is broken, and I'm actually quite happy that for Scotland to help that Westminster improve itself, but only after we are an independent nation and we are moving our country forward. I'm happy to help Westminster to help the people of England and Wales and Northern Ireland to actually become a better group of nations as compared to the situation that they currently face, as do we under this current, unfortunately, terrible Westminster system. Now, I would argue with yourselves that when we become independent, and the situation we have now, we've got a potential referendum coming within the next 2 years. We have to have that mindset of a nation and a movement that of Scotland already being that independent country. So we have to consider, what do we need to become that independent country? And this agency is actually one of those things that we actually require. We also require, as we know, to have the full remit of social security powers, immigration powers, and I've touched upon earlier on regarding freedom of movement as to how important that actually is for Scotland's economy. And also the financial powers, to name just three. Now, day after day, week after week, the Scottish Government are actually getting on with that day job. Despite what the unionists tell you, they are getting on with that day job, but it is also with one arm tied behind its back. They are showing the aspiration, and they're also showing the issue of a better Scotland, but also that issue of hope. But without actually having full range of powers, and also having all the data to hand, then there is a gap. Now, I previously worked in the IT industry, so I know how important data actually is for the decision makers, and how accurate that information needs to be for the correct decisions to be taken. So, Conference, to conclude, I do want you to think of this not solely as an agency, but also as part of the infrastructure of independence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stuart. To move the remit back, delegates, we have Christopher Duffy, followed by Declan Blench to second the remit back. Both are first-time speakers, and if we can stick very closely to time, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Conference. When I joined this party all those years ago, I never thought I would be speaking at Conference necessarily against the transfer of a role or power from Westminster to Scotland, so I really don't do this lightly. Firstly, let me be clear, I am not opposed wholly to the principle of this motion. I think going forward, to become an independent country, we do need more data, and a full statistics agency is something that an independent Scotland needs. However, when I first saw this motion, it was Disraeli that came to mind: lies, damned lies, and statistics. As someone who's had the misfortune of having to study a lot of statistics as part of my degree, I understand their power. They let us quantify the world around us, and they tell us what is going on. Unfortunately, they're also open to misuse and misinterpretation. I don't want to speak to the motivation of those who brought this motion. I'm sure it is perfectly well-intentioned, and their speeches they have just given really do give them credit. However, I get a sense that some of this motion came from a dissatisfaction with some of the statistics that we see. I think one of the most obvious examples of this is the Government Expenditure and Revenue Report of Scotland. It is an inexact measure of the fiscal situation of Scotland, but it is one born of the necessity of devolution. We must apportion national spending. And this is always going to be contentious, especially when we disagree with some of the political decisions made in that spending, perhaps most notably military spending. However, conference, GERS is, for better or for worse, fit for purpose. Don't just take my word for it. A lot of the Scottish Government's own estimates on fiscal spending are based upon those figures. So if it's good enough for them, I think delegates, it should be good enough for us. In creating our own statistics agency, we would be replicating much of the work that is done on a UK level. And some of the results of this are going to be different. And I sincerely fear, delegates, that if we did that, we would have one statistic that said one thing, and the UK government would have another statistic that said one thing. And we are going to find ourselves, this is going so well, and we're going to find ourselves in a situation where those on one side of an argument will use one statistic and those on another will use another. And in a growing era of fake news, this is something that we've got to work against. We cannot muddy the water. Conference, in speech after speech, people use statistics here. We hear about the great work of this Scottish Government reducing crime and so on. I think when we see a bad statistic, instead of trying to replace it with a different model, we need to focus on making improvements in those areas. I sense I've not won you, but thank you anyway, and please support the remit back.
Thank you, Christopher. Our final speaker for Resolution 13 is Declan Blench to speak to the remit back.
And what a room to be speaking to about this. And my notes are upside down, brilliant. I would echo a lot of what Chris says and his concerns with the motion as it's written just now. I also worry, though, that it leaves us open to, I mean, you can imagine the headlines that we're going to be getting from this. It's going to be leaving us open to accusations of creating our own statistics and our own facts, which is just going to play so badly against us, I think, in the referendum that's ahead. It's a very big gamble. The motion also says that it wants the Scottish Government to have the data necessary to make informed policy decisions. We already have a lot of that data, and the evidence of that we just heard from Jean Freeman not long ago. We were making excellent policy decisions already, and we should be able to continue doing that. We're using the same data sets we've been using for the last 12 years in government. Thank you.
Thank you, Declan. Delegates, we are moving towards the close of the morning session, so the time is marching on. I wonder if the movers of the remit back and resolution would be content to waive their rights to sum up. Thumbs up from one. Ronnie would like to sum up for the resolution. Ronnie Cowan.
Just a quote came to my mind there. I sit in a committee at Westminster, the Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Select Committee, not the sexiest name in the world, but we take evidence from the UKSA and the ONS. And I spoke to an eminent statistician down there, easier done than said, and I gave them the lies, damn lies and statistics, and they laughed at me and said, I'll tell you this, good statistics put a lie to damn lies. It's as simple as that. And we're not talking just about public policy here, we're talking about the retail price index. How do we get, who knows what the RPI actually is? Or should we be using the CPI? And we don't know right now, because one of them's tied to retail, one of them's tied to consumer prices, and they're different things. That accurate information determines your pension schemes. So if we get RPI wrong, your pension's whacked. It's as simple as that. So we need accurate information, not just for government, it's not just about policy, it's about how organisations, charities, businesses can accurately say that is a non-partisan, non-political figure which I can hang my hat on. This is not all about politics.
Thank you, Ronnie. So delegates will now move to voting on Resolution 13. We will first vote on the remit back. So if I can ask all delegates who are in favour of the remit back to please raise your cards now. Thank you. Cards down. All delegates who are against the remit back, please raise your cards now. Thank you. Cards down. The remit back falls substantially. And if we can now move to voting on the resolution, all delegates who are in favour of the resolution, please raise your cards now. Thank you. Cards down. All delegates who are against the resolution, please raise your cards now. The resolution is passed overwhelmingly. Thank you, delegates. Delegates, we have an excellent way to conclude our morning session today. We are going to be